Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Greater Napanee regular session of council for the 19th day of December 2023. Just before we call the meeting to order, I'd just like to remind everyone that this evening's meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the Town of Greater Napanee YouTube channel. Having said that, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll look for a motion to rise and report out of closed session. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I'll report that coming out of closed session this evening, council approved the closed session minutes from the November 28th and the December 6th, 2023 meetings, and received a report regarding a third-party confidential information and negotiations to be carried on by the municipality with the third party, and gave direction to staff. Having said that, we'll look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. We'll start this evening's meeting off with a public meeting under the Planning Act. I'll look for a motion to convene this evening's public meeting. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks. And is there, just to get a little bit of the legal stuff out of the way, is there anybody speaking for or against during this public meeting this evening? I do see that we do have somebody speaking for, and I know that I see the applicant in the back as well, just in case we have to have any questions answered. So having said that, you're up, Michael. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, we have a public meeting under the Planning Act to consider the request of ABNA Investments, so the proponent behind the Gibbard District project. The request is to permit an increase in height by 1 story to each respective towers 1 and 2. That would effectively bring the height of each building, Tower 1, the more westerly or southerly building, to 7 stories, and the more easterly or northerly building to 8 stories, as well as slightly increase the footprint of building 1, slightly encroaching closer towards the Napanee River, and for the conversion of the mill building, which was formerly planned for all commercial uses, to be entirely consisting of residential uses. So to my right is the proponent's planner, Mr. Yuko Leclerc from Photon Planning. And at this point, I will turn it over to Mr. Leclerc for a more detailed presentation on the proposal. I will note, however, that staff are proposing that pending the outcome of the public meeting this evening, if there are no major concerns of council or the public, that staff would be recommending approval of the applications this evening. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Leclerc to give more information regarding the proposal.
Thank you, Michael. And Mr. Leclerc, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me? Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public that are here. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with Photon Planning and Design and a registered professional planner here representing ABNA Investments in support of the applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. I've got the PowerPoint presentation. Up on either TV. I'll be looking to the one to my right. So the subject site is located in Napanee's downtown. It is the former Gibbard's Furniture Factory, as we all know. The overall property is approximately 1.7 hectares in area. The area of development that's where the proposed buildings are located is approximately 1.2 hectares, or about 3 acres. The property has frontage on both the Napanee River and Dundas Street East, and it's situated more or less between the water purification plant and the Napanee Falls. It is very much a gateway into the downtown of Napanee. So if you're moving into Napanee from the east, this is the first large-scale property that you encounter. And then if you're, of course, leaving Dundas Street headed eastwards, it provides this very prominent view terminus where the former furniture factory is located. It's in an area where there's a mix of residential and commercial uses, of course, in the downtown core. with residential uses taking prominence as you move away from Dundas Street. It is also within walking distance of and very much within view of Springside Park. And anyone who's been near the property in the past couple of years can also attest to the fact that it is currently under construction. There has been quite a bit of history associated with this site and the development applications. The original submissions were made back in 2015 for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment because the property was designated industrial. Those applications were taken to a public meeting, and then there was a bit of a rethink on ABNA's part, and they partnered with another architect who came up with the more recent designs, I should say, that were approved by council in 2018, and those included required an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, the configuration with a 6-story building and a 7-story building, and with mixed commercial uses or commercial uses at grade along Dundas Street. The former mill was proposed to be converted at the time. So the plans that were approved by council were for 113 residential units and 3,200 square meters of commercial floor space. There was a technical zoning amendment that followed in 2020 that followed the detailed design of the building. Site plan control was subsequently approved and granted, and then building permits and construction initiated in 2021. Fortunately, in 2022, construction had to be paused. Sort of a perfect storm of external factors led to having to revisit some of the economics of the project. At that time, the applicant and FOTEN brought forward applications to sever the portion of the site that was not proposed to be developed, sort of the surplus area of land. That consent was conditionally approved. And the building design was revisited, looking to find some additional efficiencies. And that's what's before council this evening, is that more efficient plan. We've increased the unit count to 184 residential units. The commercial floor area has been reduced quite a bit to just 1,200 square meters, with that being along the commercial frontage along Dundas Street, really maintaining that commercial character of the downtown. So updated applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment are submitted and are before council tonight. And I'll be speaking in a little bit more detail to the actual proposed development in a moment. But before I do that, I did want to recap very briefly the official plan and zoning that applies to the site. So because of those previous council approvals, the site is currently designated Central Business District, which is the designation that permits the broadest range of commercial and residential uses in the downtown core. That designation also permits a maximum height of up to 6 stories, which is why there's also a specific policy area designation on the site, which permits a maximum height of 7 stories, as well as requiring that the built form on the site be regulated through a height map in the zoning bylaw. There's a small portion along the shoreline that's also designated environmental protection area. The site-specific zoning on the property is a general commercial zone. So that's the C3, and it's site-specific exception 8, so C3-8. That zone permits the range of commercial and residential uses that are permitted in the downtown core. It includes a height map, which regulates both the maximum height on the property as well as amending all of the setbacks, many of which are substantially greater than the minimum setbacks of the C3 zone. It also includes a number of other provisions around parking, accessible parking, amenity area, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a zone that was very much tailored to supporting and implementing the previous proposed development, the 6- and 7-story towers. So the development that's before council this evening is very similar. Looking at the plan that's on the screen right now, it's very similar to the original plan because we're very much building on that additional plan and looking to find efficiencies. So as Mr. Nobes noted, the building 1, which if you're looking at the screen is the sort of the longer, lighter gray building on the left, that building has been extended 9 meters towards the water to accommodate some additional floor area, and the height is increased to 7 stories from 6. Building 2, which is on the right-hand side, that's the similarly extending towards the water, is increasing in height from 7 stories to 8 stories, but there's no increase to the footprint of that building proposed. The tower height is increased, but in the case of building 2, we're also adding a 3rd floor along the commercial frontage. So there's currently 2-story approved, and what we're doing is we're adding a 3rd floor along Dundas Street. It's stepped back about 1 meter, and the architectural treatment will be very different. It'll be more glazing so that it blends a little bit more into the skyline and provides a bit It really takes a step back and allows the pedestrian experience to focus on the two-story form that is a much more traditional design and much more evocative of Napanee's downtown as it's currently built. The commercial component that was previously largely located in the mill has been removed. So the mill building will be increased in height to 5 stories, and that'll be converted to residential use entirely, so that the remaining commercial use will just be located in buildings 1 and 2 along the streetscape at grade on Dundas. We're also refining the parking ratio a little bit. So the underground parking garage has been rejigged a little bit. We're redesigned so that it can accommodate the required parking ratio. The original approval was for 1.17 parking spaces per unit, which was a broad sort of a catch-all requirement that would have captured both the per unit requirement as well as the visitor without really distinguishing between the two. So we're keeping that ratio, but what we're asking to do is to provide a little bit more delineation. So 1 parking space per unit, and then 0.17 parking spaces for visitors. So that the total aggregate is the same, but there's a little bit more clarity between which spaces are for which function. We're also not seeking to amend the commercial requirement. So the general C3 zone doesn't actually have a commercial parking requirement. There is a site-specific requirement in this case. We're proposing to keep it, recognizing that the amount of commercial floor area on the property has decreased significantly. But what we're asking to do is to recognize that the visitor and commercial parking requirements can be can effectively overlap. So the parking can serve both functions. We are over providing in some ways. So the requirement is about 32 spaces if we were to just look at that requirement, and we're providing 45. So we're over providing a little bit in terms of that sort of visitor and commercial space. And there's also, as part of our traffic analysis, we reviewed and confirmed that there's quite a bit of on-street parking. The utilization means that there's going to be room for uptake in the on-street parking. So if there's ever overflow on the site, there's available parking in the area. We're also providing quite a bit of amenity space. If you add up all the balconies and floor space on the site, there's over 2 acres of amenity area. And if we just look at the at-grade amenity and landscaped area, we're at just under 1.5 acres. So there's quite a bit of open space and amenity area on the property. One design note that I'll focus on in this slide. So this slide was showing a couple of renderings. The rendering on the top is the view, sort of an aerial view from the direction of Springside Park. Looking at the site, you can see the old chimney. You can see buildings 1 and 2 that are very contemporary in design, and you can see the more contemporary design of the mill building. But the plaza between buildings 1 and 2 has been changed. The original approval had shown that as being more of a much more hardscape surface, recognizing that its intended function was to draw people into the commercial mill building, as well as providing a space for markets and events and things like that. There was some very minimal landscaping that was incorporated in the design to provide some buffering, because there are residential units in both towers that front onto that plaza. But with the sort of the rethink and the change in use of the mill building from commercial to residential, that plaza has been fundamentally re-envisioned. And there's quite a bit more green space that's being provided. There's some berms or some interesting sort of topography that's been incorporated. You can't see it on this particular rendering, but there's a lot more vegetation that's being provided, trees and shrubs and so on, that's going to provide a much more private amenity space for residents that live on the property and that live in these 2 buildings. So they'll have sort of almost a private picnic area that they'll be able to use. But one of the things that we've kept is that the chimney is a prominent focal point on the site. So the design of that plaza has been adjusted, and the sort of the hardscape surface provides this sort of view plane, drawing viewers' eyes to the chimney when they're coming in off of Dundas Street, or even just walking on Dundas Street, which will provide some visual interest to the pedestrian experience. I'll note from an architectural perspective that the mill building, the original approval had anticipated that the building could be reused much more than it can be because of the residential component. So by switching it over to residential, there's some structural considerations that mean that less of the building can be retained. But what that also means from an architectural side of things is that it can be designed in a much more modern, contemporary style that will play off much better with the building 1 and building 2. So it feels much more like a cohesive building design there. With the sort of the modern elements internal to the site and a lot of that more heritage feeling components of the district along Dundas Street East. And you can see that on the bottom image on this slide, where you've got the view of the building along Dundas Street. On the right-hand side, you can see the original furniture factory building retained and conserved. Then you can see the sort of the lower 2 stories of building 2 along Dundas Street, designed in a more traditional kind of way. And that 3rd floor stepped back and with significant glazing, so that it kind of sort of tucks itself back a little bit into the skyline. And even the orientation of the buildings along Dundas Street is intended to sort of to reduce their sort of presence along the street, so that the street feels much more like a lower pedestrian friendly kind of scale. So in support of these applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, we do also have a site plan control application that's in. We've prepared a number of technical studies. So we have a noise study, traffic, urban design brief, servicing report, a stormwater management report. We did a sun and shadow study to examine those impacts, and we have a planning justification. And what these studies have all effectively done is that demonstrated that the site's design can be supported and implemented at a technical level. We know that there are feasible solutions to accommodate the needs of the development. In some cases, the design will have to be iterated further at site plan control, but in some cases, we know at this stage that we've addressed all the needs that we have. So from an urban design perspective, for example, that'll be implemented through the height map. As part of the planning justification, we also, of course, reviewed the policy framework and found that this is a development that very much aligns with provincial policies, as well as town and county official plan policies and direction around intensification, housing creation, mixed use, compatibility, and so forth. That's iterated both in our planning rationale as well as the report from Arcadis. Looking at the actual proposed amendments that are before council tonight. So we are proposing an official plan amendment. The central business designation, we're not proposing to change, but we are proposing to tweak the site-specific policy. And specifically what we're seeking to amend here is to allow an increase to eight stories, which is necessary to support, of course, the 8-story of building 2. We're also asking to amend the boundary of the environmental protection designation. That comes from comments that we received from the Conservation Authority around the erosion hazard limit. Just effectively, they've done additional work and they have more precise data that we need to incorporate into the policy framework. The policy will continue to require that a height map be applied to the site from a zoning perspective. So we're not proposing to change that. In terms of the zoning, there's sort of 3 components to the zoning. So I mentioned at the beginning that there was a consent application last year. We're proposing to recognizing that severed lot is not necessarily part of this development. It doesn't need to be captured in the site-specific zoning or in the height map. We're proposing to sort of rezone that portion to C3, which is the generic downtown general commercial zone. We're proposing to update the boundary of the environmental protection zone. So that'll be consistent with the official plan designation for the EP. And then, of course, the balance of the site, sort of the bulk of the site will remain C3 8 zone, but we'll be amending the height map, for example, that regulates the maximum height as well as all of the setbacks. We're asking to reduce the commercial floor area down to 1,200 square meters as a maximum, to restrict the mill, so the mill would not be permitted for commercial use. It could only be used for residential. We're also proposing to allow those commercial and visitor parking spaces to be shared so that they can be counted towards both. And I believe in the addendum of tonight's package, there's some other amendments to the zoning bylaw. Effectively, what we're looking to do is to carry forward any provision in the site-specific zoning that we're not amending. We want to make sure that gets captured in the site-specific zoning, and that's what the addendum is effectively doing. It's just making sure that all those other components of the site-specific zoning that we've relied on for the site's design are maintained in the C3 8 zone that will continue to apply to the property. I'm not going to go through each individual provision. They're captured in detail in the staff report and in the addendum, but certainly if there's any questions about the zoning, I can speak to those in detail. For council's benefit and for the public, I've also got a slide here showing the actual height map. And you can see that this is the tool. This will be actually in the body of the zoning bylaw for easy reference. And it shows both the areas where the heights are regulated. It provides the maximum height that's permitted sort of in those individual boxes. And it also regulates all of the individual setbacks from the property lines. So it's a very, very restrictive tool. It doesn't provide a lot of flexibility to the applicant to stray from that original design. And that's intentional here because the idea is that it's recognizing that this is a very much a landmark site. And council's decision is based on the proposed development that's before it and the details and nuances of it. So we want to make sure that what's actually built is what's presented to council. And this is the most effective way of doing that from a zoning perspective. There are some flexibilities built into it, buffers for the setbacks and height to account for detailed mechanical design if there's any adjustments that are needed once we get all of the different architectural disciplines involved, but they're not enough to substantially alter the design of the buildings. And with that, I would just add that it is our opinion that this is a project that's going to contribute positively to the housing supply in Napanee. It'll also help invigorate the downtown core. It includes important components of commercial along the streetscape. It's compatible with the surrounding uses and with the area. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement and both lower and upper tier official plans. It is our recommendation that this be approved, and we agree with the recommendation from Arcadis. And because there is a recommendation on the floor, there will be this evening. Should council choose to move ahead with it, we would ask that council approve this. But for the moment, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
Great, thank you, sir. Very detailed report. Is there any questions of council with respect to the presentation? Go ahead, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I'm just a little bit curious about the reduction in the commercial aspect of the project. So has it been decided that the commercial aspect there's not going to be the demand there that originally there was, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll do my best to answer that question. There's two components, I guess, to the change. One is that in order to maximize the viability, the increase in residential unit count where there's a guaranteed market is critical. There are some changes in the commercial market that are substantial. What we've done is by maintaining that commercial along the streetscape. Let me take a moment to backtrack. In the previous approvals, there was some concern that there was too much commercial being added to the site. And there hadn't been a full commercial land needs assessment done. I think ultimately we were able to satisfy those concerns, but they've never really gone away. There was a lot of commercial land here. So there was also, I think, an impetus here of mitigating those potential concerns and providing that additional housing and improving the viability of the project. It's sort of 3 or 4 birds with one stone are all being captured by reducing the commercial and increasing the residential.
Yep, go ahead, Councilor Martin.
So it's in the spirit of the mixed use project. So there's still going to be commercial there that the residents of those condos are going to be able to use. Like originally, I kind of envisioned the commercial that was going to be added there was going to be based, not necessarily 100% for, but used by those condo residential dwellers.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the idea originally was that the commercial would serve both. There weren't enough units to support all of the commercial floor area internally, so there was a need to draw in the community and really extend the downtown. There's still 1,200 square meters, which is almost 13,000 square feet of commercial that will be added here. So there's a lot of commercial space here that will serve the needs of residents, and there will be the opportunity. But ultimately, the needs of the residents will be met by the individual commercial uses that go in. And if, for example, if the commercial floor space is all filled with, commercial clothing retailers, residents will still have to go a little bit elsewhere for some of their other needs.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep, thank you, Councilor Martin. Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Mr. Leclerc, thank you very much for your detailed report. I have a question, just if you could maybe expand a little bit on the mill building with the top of bank setback. Going through the drawings, and I realize it's just a drawing. I understand that the residents on the water side are going to have balconies that are going to stick over into the setback, but also on the ground floor, there was a hard patio or something that was mentioned in the report that was going to impede into that area as well. and then we have the trail that goes through there. So I'm just thinking that it's really close for pedestrian traffic to walk through there. And is there any means to have a separation between there where you're just going to keep it as open?
Forgive me, through you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I'll start this and then Mr. Novus can sort of pick up where I leave off. I flipped to a slide that I think speaks to a little bit of your concern. The original submission had anticipated that those at-grade patios, which are, so the mill building at grade will retain the existing footprint, but above that, the upper levels will cantilever out towards the water. The at-grade space below the cantilever will be patios. Those patios in the original submission were anticipated to require sort of a retaining wall, and they would be built up a little bit. Through consultation with the Conservation Authority, that's no longer an option. We know that the Conservation Authority would not be supportive of that. They'll need those to be graded without sort of any retaining wall. But what we anticipate needing to do through the site plan control process is incorporate a little bit of separation between those patios and the pathway. I would also note that the pathway at this stage is not, it's still shown a little bit conceptually. It hasn't been fully designed yet. So there will be opportunities to provide a little bit more separation between the pathway and those at-grade patios. I think once we get through the detailed design exercise of the pathway, and that will determine what buffering needs to be incorporated. Is it a small privacy fence? Is it a particular type of vegetation and so on? Maybe the grade can be adjusted so that there's a little bit more separation. And I think those are components that we'll be dealing with through the detailed design of both the site as well as the pathway itself when that comes online.
And through your worship, just to build on that, I will note under the previous site plan control approval in 2020 timeframe, the site plan control agreement actually does bind the property owner to providing the municipality a suitably graded site such that the town would be able to build a trail, as effectively lay gravel or lay asphalt for a trail, whatever the municipality wants to effectively, however we would like to build that trail. So the proponent needs to grade the land appropriately. So by them understanding how the patios will be impacting that necessary grading and the ultimate placement of the trail, we're able to leverage that provision in the site plan control bylaw by requiring, effectively ensuring that we require the proponent to meet that clause, but building in that ability to have some buffer and some level of separation between the actual patio and the trail surface itself. We know the Conservation Authority is certainly amenable to grade changes to accommodate a trail. They're not terribly keen on new building footprint within this hazard setback that the building is already located within. They're satisfied with the proposal that's before council because the footprint, the physical footprint touching the ground is not increasing. The cantilever, they don't have concern for, and they don't have concern for the at-grade patio, but we will have some flexibility to work with the Conservation Authority and the property owner to get that land graded appropriately, have some separation, and be able to build that trail ultimately.
Great, thank you. I appreciate both of your answers being so detailed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Councillor Pinal. Is there any other questions of these two gentlemen? Go ahead, Councillor Pinal.
Thank you, Worship. This is for the chief, fire chief. Chief, I'm just wondering, do we have any issues? Do you have any issues with the increased height of the building?
Through your worship, no, we've had discussions with the building department. We have no issues with the requested height extension.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the presentation this evening? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. And I'll just quickly ask, is there anybody else in the body of the council chambers that would like to speak for or against the application or the public meeting that we're currently involved in? Seeing none, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll look for a motion to adjourn the public meeting under the authority of the Planning Act. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Shank. There's no further comments, questions, or concerns. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Presentations. I don't believe we have any presentations this evening. Deputation, scheduled deputations, new items, and I don't believe we have any deputations here this evening either. Deputations items on the agenda, and I don't believe, unless there's something I don't know, I don't believe we have any of those this evenings. So moving directly into our administrative consent agenda, we'll just go through this so we can go through each one and then we'll look for a motion at the end, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Madam Clerk. The council minutes for the regular session of council November 28th, special session of council, December 6th, 2023. Is there anything in those minutes that anybody would like to speak to or talk about? Seeing none, the committee meetings, the Municipal Heritage Committee meeting minutes for December 7th, 2023. Is there anybody that would like to speak to anything in that? And I know Councillor Martin is the chair, I believe, or on that committee. Is there anything you'd like to bring any attention to, Councillor Martin?
No, I think the report speaks for itself unless somebody has a specific question on something. I just let the report speak for itself.
Great, thank you. Seeing none, correspondence for information. We've received a number of pieces of correspondence for information dated December 19th, 2023. Is there anything in this correspondence that anybody would like to pull out and have any conversations about? Seeing none. Environmental Services Product Care Association of Canada Municipal Lighting Material Services Agreement. There is a report contained, and is there anything that anybody would like to speak to with respect to this report? Or would like to have something highlighted? Seeing none, the 2022 Town of Greater Napanee Annual Report Prototype, and we've been provided with a copy of the 2022 report, and I think we're going to try and use that as a prototype. Is there anything in that report? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Through your worship, just to comment on it, that although that this information is available to all of us, it was very refreshing to see that we're looking to put this all in one document. And it would be nice to see a year in review type of thing where, you know, we all get busy and we do a lot of projects, and we sometimes need to just reflect on the back of what kind of a year that we had. So I'm really looking forward to this not being a prototype and actually being something that we're going to be receiving from now on. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Councillor Pennell. And it really was quite an interesting read to see where we started out and where we ended up. So I look forward to the 2023 one as well. So the Community Emergency Preparedness Grant. Is there anything with respect to that report that anybody would like to speak to or talk about? Seeing none, and I think that brings us to the end of our consent agenda, if I'm not mistaken, Madam Clerk. So we'll look for a motion that council consent to the approval of the following routine items: that the minutes of the regular session of council dated November 28th and the special session of council dated December 6, 2023 be adopted as presented, that the draft Municipal Heritage Committee minutes dated December 7, 2023 be received for information, that the correspondence for information items dated December 19, 2023 be received, that council receive for information the Environmental Services Product Care Association of Canada Municipality Lighting Materials Services Agreement Report, and further that council endorses the Product Care Association of Canada Municipal Lighting Material Services Agreement and authorizes the mayor and the clerk to execute the agreement on behalf of the town. That council receive for information the Town of Greater Napanee Annual Report Prototype, that council receive for information the Community Emergency Preparedness Grant Report, and further that council authorizes the Town of Greater Napanee to enter into an agreement for funding under the Provincial Community Emergency Preparedness Grant, CEPG 2023-2024 program, and further that council authorizes any of the following individuals to execute any applications or agreements required under the funding program: Terry Richardson, Mayor; Brant Zatterberg, Deputy CAO; Brian Calver, Deputy Mayor; and Jessica Walters, Clerk; and Nathan Murphy, Deputy Treasurer. Look for a motion to move that motion. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns? All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Unfinished business. I don't believe, Madam Clerk, we have any unfinished business for this evening. Next up is items for consideration, growth and expansion, PLOPMA 2023-057 and PLZACO 2023-058 Gibbard District. And Mr. Nobes, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really don't have much more to add beyond what was just recently discussed during the public meeting. Staff are recommending approval of the application predominantly in light of the recent changes to the Planning Act through Bill 109, whereby effectively the province is pushing us to make decisions in a timely manner in light of potential fee refund requirements if decisions are not rendered within certain timeframes. We're within those timeframes, but staff have undertaken a thorough review of the applications before council, and we are supportive of the request for the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, I would be happy to answer any further questions that council may have.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Is there any further questions or comments for Michael? Go ahead, Councillor Norrie.
No, I just move approval.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Norrie. We do have a recommendation that council receive for information the growth and expansion PLOPMA 2023-057 and PLZACO 2023-058 planning report, and further that council approve the applications subject to the following conditions: that council consider and decide on the merits of the written and verbal submissions received up to and including the council meeting, and that should new information be received or further input received, raise points for further consideration. This report and opinion herein be revisited as needed. Moved by, oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Just a point for clarification, staff have not received any verbal or written comments from the public following circulation to neighboring properties, just so council's aware.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you. We have a motion moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Growth and expansion, Goodyear Expansion Community Improvement Plan, CIP application. And I believe, Michael, you're going to speak to that as well.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So hot on the heels of council's approval or adoption rather of the Industrial Community Improvement Plan, Goodyear has not yet officially announced, but they've effectively announced a major expansion to their facility, consisting of approximately 500,000 square foot of new floor area for manufacturing, warehousing, and office space. This project is valued at over $550 million. It would add an additional 200 highly skilled direct full-time jobs to the facility, and it would aid in retaining the existing operation at the site, which currently employs an existing approximately 800 employees. This addition or this expansion rather would also indirectly see the creation of approximately 400 indirect jobs as well. So this project absolutely aligns with the intent and the provisions of the community improvement plan that was recently passed. The thresholds are well below the numbers that Goodyear is proposing here with this project, and they would certainly fit into the criteria for the highest tax increment grant bracket effectively, whereby after assessment, after project completion, the effect that project has on the assessment of the parcel, the resultant tax revenues that the municipality would be receiving, they would be eligible for 100% refunding of that in year one, 75% in year two, 50 in year three, and 25% in year four. And then by year five, they would be paying full rate to the municipality. Goodyear has also requested a refund of the development charges owing for the project. Given the existing large scale footprint of that site, the Development Charges Act requires a mandatory 50% credit of the floor area. Ultimately, what this amounts to is just shy of $650,000 in development charges. Goodyear's request is that this amount be refunded in a calendar year. So they're looking for this transaction, if approved by council, to take place in the early Q1 of 2024. Development charges are linked to issuance of building permits in certain stages of construction, and the timing would align well with when they plan to start their construction in the very early part of January. So I would like to highlight for council's awareness that amount of monies would not be able to be drawn from the development charge reserve funds, and that would need to come out of the general operating fund. It seems like a substantial sum of money. However, from an operational standpoint, we will also be having an equivalent amount or more than this coming into the town's reserves for building permitting as well. So it's effectively a trade, if you will, to that effect. So staff are recommending approval. This project aligns very well with the CIP and the intention behind the CIP to see industrial growth occur. Goodyear may also apply to the County of Lennox and Addington for a similar grant, and the county also has the ability to effectively align granting with lower tier municipality community improvement plans. So I assume that request will be made of the county in very short order as well, following decision of council this evening. But again, this is a very large project, and it more than aligns with the requirements of the recently approved community improvement plan, and staff are recommending approval of the application this evening.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and extremely good news. It's really nice to hear that. So is there any questions of Michael with respect to his presentation? Go ahead, Councillor Brunel.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Michael, thanks for the report. Just wondering if we do something with the DC charges, where do we go from here? How long do we have to advertise this, or how long does it take before we can say to Goodyear, here it is?
Through your worship, so through the community improvement plan that was passed, it gave council the ability to provide grants for projects that qualify under the CIP. So that public process is complete. So the granting, the approval of providing that grant has gone through the public process already. So following council's decision this evening, staff would be able to provide Goodyear an update that whenever we're ready to make that transaction happen, it's ready to go effectively.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Brunel. Is there any other questions or comments for Michael before we entertain a motion? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor
I'll
Shank.
just move staff recommendation.
Great, thanks, Councillor Shank. Move staff recommendation that council receive for information the growth and expansion, Goodyear expansion 2023 community improvement plan, CIP application report, and further that council approve the application for a tax increment equivalent grant TIEG in the development charge rebate as submitted by Goodyear Canada Inc. in accordance with bylaw number 2023-0077, and further that council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute both the industrial tax increment equivalent grant agreement and development charge repayment agreement with the Goodyear Canada Inc. in accordance with bylaw number 2023-007. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Norrie. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Michael. Extension of engineering services report. And I believe Mr. Cuthell is coming up to the front to speak to that. And whenever you're ready, Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I've touched on most of the important points through the staff report. To give a quick synopsis of it, this was an RFP that was released in 2018 for engineering services for the town of Napanee. Through that proposal, the towns at its sole discretion had the ability to renew for 2 consecutive terms of 5 years. Throughout the first term, it was brought back to council in April of last year, and the belief of staff was to just do a wholesome review of the agreement itself and ensure that we were getting the best value. Staff had put the agreement out for comment by all staff, and once received all comments in, we consulted, and there wasn't a great deal of changes being proposed. We also consulted with the County of Lennox and Acton, who in December of 2022 had put a request out for the similar services, professional engineering and consulting services. They believe they had 3 proponents in, and upon review, it was deemed that Jewel was the professionally and financially the best choice for the county to move forward with. And I believe it was in excess of 15% reduction in fees compared to the average of the other bidders. There are a couple other things of note. The County of Lennox and Acton, utilizing the same engineering firm as them, there are joint projects. There are some in the future that are coming up. If we have the ability to partner with, it'd be the reconstruction of Center Street, a phase 4 of Dundas Street that would be near the Gibberts District, and other smaller projects that take place in town, utilizing the same consultant in the area. There are efficiencies to be had with soils analysis and geotech, different testing. We're always in touch with each other to save demob costs of having the same activities performed by the same companies. And in the past, we've experienced a financial benefit by utilizing those partnerships. So after another review from the remaining of the year, staff had brought back the request of council to entertain extending for 5 years.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Is there any questions or comments for Jeff with respect to his report or his presentation? Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Jeff, for giving us this report. It was my understanding in April of 23 that we asked for staff to go out for a request for proposal on that, and we have resolution 243/23. You're saying that your understanding was that you just did a review of it and piggybacked off of what the county did. Is that correct?
That's through your worship. That's correct. Councilor Pennell, as we talked earlier, the understanding that staff had at the time was to consult with the county and other lower tiers and to see that this was the best avenue to move forward with, to do a wholesome review of it. We did conduct a review of the RFP, and as consulting with the staff that are in place now, it was to come back with what we believe could be the best moving forward. A great deal of work goes into staff time and the consultant's time to bid these. And when we had the information that was in front of us, we believe that this could save a great deal of time.
Okay, thank you. You can only imagine, I can't speak for all council, but you can only imagine what my thoughts were when I saw this recommendation come through. And yet, looking at 243/23, I was expecting a request for proposal sometime throughout this year before we were going to extend it. I was going to be looking for numbers and such, and the numbers that you provided to us on this is for the county, I do believe, which would most likely be similar to what the town is, but I would have liked to have seen this done and to the town, much like what we asked for, what I was under the impression that we asked for on that. And I do recognize that you're saying that a lot of work goes into it and such for both staff and for the people that bid. But there is on your staff report an alternative option, and that is for us to go out for tender. And that's what we asked for, or that's what I believe that we asked for back in April. So is there an opportunity, is there time to go out for tender before April 30th? Or when do we need this, by April? Yeah, April 30th. is there time to do up a request for tender, a proposal, and seek the results by then?
Just a clarifying factor on that. The numbers that are within the report tonight are the town of Greater Napanee numbers. That would be, we have, within the 2018 agreement, there was extension for 2 5-year terms, and that would all be dealt with within our agreement, which is similar to many other agreements. We would have to consult with our team to see if the timelines could be met to satisfy that request by April.
Yeah, and I see Mr. Murphy reaching for his microphone, so he may be able to help with it. So
Through your worship, in terms of preparing the RFP and getting it out to tender, we do have a template from the previous one, so there would obviously need to be some updates, but we can get that done. In terms of timeline of actually having it posted, I believe it's 25 days in our bylaw. So we could potentially do that in that timeline. I don't know how long it took previously to evaluate the engineering services. I don't know what that entails. It's definitely not my area of expertise. Just to add some context to this too, to Councillor Pennell's point, I do realize this was a resolution on the books. At the time that this got brought forward, I think there was some different driving forces behind that. It's not something that staff completely forgot about. I would just say that priorities may be shifted to some degree. And if there is the appetite to tender, we can absolutely make that happen. But I don't think it was, a willingness to just, not follow resolution, but more so it maybe fell down the totem pole a little bit at the time. But we can absolutely make that happen in that time frame, assuming evaluation could be done in a 2-month period. I don't know what it entails and how much updating would need to go into that RFP, but in terms of actually having it posted, there would be enough time, or we could get close to that. Absolutely.
We would have to review the time of it being posted. It may be greater than 25 days. These are substantial proposals that the bidding proponents would have to create.
Thank you.
great. Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
My question is to our engineer, Mike. Mike, when you go through this proposal for 2024 extension and rate adjustment request, when you go through, because you signed off on it, Nathan and Brent and Shannon. So the point is when you look through this and you deal being an engineer and being the county, and Jewel Engineering is doing business with a lot of other municipalities within the county itself, do you feel that there's any justification to go for an RFP, or do you think we're getting the best bang for the buck right now? That's what I'd like to know.
Off the cuff answer, I think there's good value for money with the proponent. And I think there's some level of consideration, I guess, that could be had towards the county's results. Although numbers that we might get in a RFP response wouldn't be exactly the same, I think they would be shifting relative to one another if it were the similar proponents putting bids forward. So I think there's good value for the money with the proponent with Jewel Engineering ultimately.
Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So are you happy with the services that they've been, they're providing? That's number one.
Through your worship, from a development review standpoint, I don't have any concern with their services. I can't speak for Capital Works, Public Works, that Mr. Cuffles is dealing with on a more routine basis, but from a development review perspective, I don't have concern with the quality of work that we're quality of review work that we're receiving.
Thanks, Michael. Did you have anything else, Councillor Shank?
If I remember correctly, in April, I was the one that made that motion. All right, but the point was not 100%, but I remember it because it was quite a heated discussion. But businesses change, times change. Talking to Michael and listening to what Jeff has said, and knowing the amount of work that we're doing, it's not the grand scale that there was, in the past. But the point is what would be the benefit of going for an RFP right now, and would we have any substantial savings? All right, that was my question that I was asking myself. And if there isn't substantial savings, then for extra work that we have, that we need, maybe their work doing other things would be more beneficial and save us more money. So that's the reason why I'm kind of leaning to what the report says. If you're happy with the services and the price that they're providing for it right now, and other areas and other municipalities might have different engineers in different counties and what they're getting paid. All right, if it's all comparable from what engineers talk, and then why change it? That's the only reason why I was asking those questions that way.
I guess we won't know unless we go to an RFP to see if we get a better deal. That's, I guess, it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? So just legally, logistically, I think if there's any appetite to allow the 5-year extension, and Madam Clerk, I'm going to draw on your expertise with this. I do believe that we need, because we do have a resolution on the books, we do need a vote of 2/3 to overturn that resolution. Am I correct with that, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. And I do apologize to council for not having noted that in the staff report initially, because this would be changing course from the intent of that motion that was made back in April. Any member can make a motion to reconsider, but the motion requires a 2/3 majority to pass. If the motion to reconsider passes, then the new motion could be put on the floor. If it does not pass, then council's options would be to reaffirm the direction to tender before April 30th, or a possible alternative option would be to do one more 1-year extension, which would still meet the spirit and intent of reviewing this contract within this term of council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So there are a couple of options. Does anybody else want to comment? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship. So I have a question, just to ensure that I'm understanding this correctly. So they've provided the 2024 hourly rate schedule. How much was the increase from the first 5 years, which was 2018 to 2023?
I don't have a percent increase that I haven't worked out. I would mention that since 2018, they have held their rate at the 2018 rates. And then they also did agree to, at the first of last year, to continue holding those rates for one more year. They are proposing to do the raise up to what the current rates would be as of today. And that rate schedule is what's in front of you today.
So the rate, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
So the rate schedule, the 2024 hourly rate schedule is what they're proposing for 2024. And then they're looking to increase beyond that, or this is the 2024 hourly rate schedule and it will continue for 5 years.
Yeah, as of right now, we're still locked in with the 2018 rates for the remainder of 2023. And then the 2024 rate schedule is what is appendicized to this report.
But for the next 5 years or just for 1 year?
It would be subject to annual
Increases,
review
okay.
and increase if necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Is there anybody else that would like to ask Jeff any questions before we entertain a motion for the floor? Seeing none, I think staff is looking for some sort of direction. So I think we do understand, or we do know what our options are. Is there anybody who would like to entertain putting a motion on the floor with respect to this request? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is that back in April, we put a resolution on the floor, and I don't think there's anybody to blame that for the fact that the RFP hasn't gone out. I mean, obviously, we've probably used our treasuring or our treasurer's department, financial department, probably as much as possible. So we do have some help coming early in the year. So I don't think it'll be a problem putting asking for the RFP. I try to look at this objectively as if it was any other contract. if it was any other contract, would we, after 5 years, look at seeing if we can get a better deal? Or would we just roll it over for another 5 years? Because if we rolled over for another 5 years, we're looking at a 10-year contract. So it depends on what the will of council is, do you think we can get a better deal, or is it worth putting it out there just to see what is out there? Or are we content with the product that we have? It's really just quite as simple as that. So, but we do have a resolution on the floor, and I think that's or on the books, and I think that's what we have to address first, is that, is there a will to reconsider resolution 243-23? If there is, I mean, it's quite a simple answer to it. If it isn't, are we content with following the resolution that we made back in April, or do we want to look for another 1-year extension, which is kind of just kicking the can down the road, to be quite honest with you at this point? But that's sort of my thoughts on it. So, Councillor Pennell.
I'll make a motion that we uphold 243-23 and that we go for a request for proposal.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there a seconder for that motion? We'll ask one more time. Is there a seconder for that motion to put it on the floor to speak to it? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, I believe if there is no seconder, then the motion is lost.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Staff is looking for some direction. Is there another motion? Councillor Shank.
I'd like to make a motion that instead of having a 5-year, go ahead, and we have to reconsider it. We have to bring it up. So my motion will be this, to bring it back on the table to discuss what length and what extension that we want to do. Then we'll have to have that discussion, right?
The motion is to reconsider resolution 243 from April 25th, 2023. Am I correct? We have a motion on the floor. Councillor Shank has put. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Martin. Before we call the vote, and I believe we're going to need 2/3 of the vote. Am I correct, Madam Clerk? Is there any other questions, comments, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
The only reason why I put that motion on the floor is because Councillor Pennell has put the motion up, or tried to get the motion that we stay with our original motion that was done in April. That failed. So therefore, we have to, for us to legally discuss this now, we have to bring this motion that was done in April up for discussion so we can discuss it. So therefore, that's the reason why I've done that. And then we can decide what length of period of time you want to do. Do you want to do it for another 5 years, 1 year, 2 years, or what do you want to do? So that's why I made that motion.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Shank. Councillor Pennell.
Through your worship, I just want to make everybody clear that the reason why I made the motion to uphold 243-23 is because we are still in the fiscal 23 year. And my question was satisfied that there is still time to do it. So I think that with us sitting around here at council, and obviously there was a will back in April to do this, for this to become a resolution, there's still time in 23 to have this done. And I feel with the spirit of the motion or spirit of the resolution that this should have went through.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other comments or questions with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Hicks.
Through your worship. So if we said we want to go out for tender, that can be prepared and released before the end of the year. And then we are without any engineering services for however long in the first part of 2024 until a decision is made on who's going to be selected. Is that correct?
So through your worship, having it out before the end of the year was, I would say, relatively unlikely. I would say into the new year is doable, but to have it out, obviously we're coming up to the break and there's a number of people away. Sure, I could prepare something that could be posted, but I guarantee it will not meet the needs of what we would technically need. So that's possible, but it wouldn't be fully encompassing what we would need for engineering services. As for your comment about the contract not being, the contract extends to the end of April is my understanding, correct? So we would be covered off until then.
I thought I read December 31st, 2023.
Madam Clerk, you can go ahead. I think it's 30th of April, but go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, through your worship, the contract's on a May 1 to April 30th year.
Do your
Oh,
worship, I believe the grant last year was for a 1-year extension, which would be until April 30th of 2024.
That's correct.
So we would have until that time to prepare. Just to give another highlight on this, if I believe, in my opinion, through staff who greatly works with the engineering companies, I would like to see us do a longer extension. So if it was council's wishes to do another RFP, I would propose that we do another RFP that would satisfy the wishes of council fully and so we can be into a longer term agreement. These projects that we would like to prepare and have shelf ready and everything else. I have been through the experience of losing a brick and mortar engineering firm on projects we've had ready to deploy on. And it has costed the municipality a great deal of money when they packed up and left. Right now, we do have one that's that staff are happy with their services. And I do believe it was a financially vetted, though I do ask that we go for a longer term, however we get there.
Councillor Hicks.
So Mr. Cuffle, through your worship, Mr. Cuffle raises a good point, and I'm thinking back to what was provided to us in the draft capital budget. And I think there was, if I recall, 5, if not 6 projects that you were looking at doing pre-engineering and preparations to have shelf ready. And I think 3 of those were in Ward 2. Not that I'm favoring one word over another. But I do realize that starting from scratch with a new firm is very labor intensive. Is it possible that we do an extension with Jewel for 1 year for 2024, while at the same time going out for a fulsome RFP with the understanding that whoever wins it would have 5 years?
That would appear to be an option under the original resolution. However, we do have a motion on the floor that we'll have to deal with first. Councillor Shank.
I'm just reading the letter because what Councillor Hicks has already said, and this is from the Jewel Engineering. Earlier this year, at the request of the town, our offices had agreed to a 1-year extension of services. That extension is set to expire December 31st, 2023. And that's the reason why I was kind of going, I don't know where you're getting April from because I never saw an April here, but that's the letter that was done. So, yeah, so I agree with, that's the way I read it, as of December 31st, 2023, have a nice day, guys.
Through your worship. So I can see the confusion here. The original staff report has an extension for a year from April 30th onward. So from the April staff report, so there's conflicting dates now at this point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So I have a motion on the table. I call the question. Go ahead. Do I have a seconder to go ahead to discuss this?
I believe we have a motion that's on the floor. You were the mover and Councillor Martin was the seconder. So I just want to ensure that there's no other further conversations that need to happen before we call the vote. Is there any other conversations that anybody wants to have with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Counselor Hicks,
Could you please reread the motion? Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, the motion is the council reconsider resolution number 584 slash, wait, is that? No, sorry, that's not the right number.
I think it's 243 slash
Number
23.
this is motion 584. Motion 243/23 to reopen discussion about the length of the engineering services contract.
Are we good, Counselor Hicks? And if there's no further questions, comments, or concerns, just reminding everybody we will need 2/3 of the vote. Go ahead, Counselor Pennell.
Your worship, can I request a recorded vote, please?
It may be easier. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, you're up.
Ward 1, Counselor Shank.
Yes.
Ward 2, Counselor Hicks.
Yes.
Ward 3, Counselor Pennell.
No.
Ward 4, Counselor Norrie.
Yes.
Ward 5, Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I believe that is the end, or no. So now we got to continue on. Sorry. The floor is now open if we're going to entertain a motion moving forward. And it's wide open, so go ahead, Counselor Shank.
I know longer the better, but my question is to our staff and Mike and Jeff. Of course, loyalty, you've got an excellent working environment. I have no complaints with Jewel that what they've done in the past. The rates seem to be fair. I would try to, in the contract negotiations, kind of make sure that we don't have the cost of living, you know what I mean? That they stay within, get the best bang for the buck, you know what I mean? That's just straight business. But do you feel we should go for an RFP after 2 years, 3 years, since they've already done 5 years? Or should we give the 5 years right now? I know, Jeff, you wrote the report, so you would like to have another 5 years, but Mike, Nathan, I want to hear your input also before I make a decision.
Through your worship, so the question is, what is my opinion on how long we should renew before doing another RFP, before issuing a new RFP? I'm indifferent from a development review standpoint. I mean, I'll defer to Mr. Cothel's perspective on having municipal capital related projects shovel ready and that forecasting. There certainly is benefit to having the same engineering company pre-planning multiple projects. They're familiar with with the municipality and the capacity restrictions, for example, and the like. To put a number on it, I to be honest, I don't know what the right magic number would be. I see the benefit of doing an RFP, but I also see the benefit of extending this for a certain period of time. Between 2 and 3 years, I would think it'd be in that sort of range. Would give us a good amount of breathing room to do another RFP and lock it in for a more substantial amount of time.
Yeah, was there another question? Go ahead, Counselor Shank.
So I'll make a motion that we extend it for the reason why I'm making this decision is I totally believe that we should always get the best bang for buck for all the services that we're doing. But in April of last year is totally different than what we know a lot more, what has transpired, how it's being run, where the problems were, where the problems weren't. And I think we've grown as a municipality a lot since that. And that was tied into a whole lot of other aspects of that motion back then, dealing with the county and a lot of other things. So just because for the continuity of this term is that we continue to the rest of this term of council, all right? And that gives you enough time with the capital works that is going on. And then the new council, I hate to tie the new council, would it be in years from now, tie their hands on what they're doing. But for now, that's what I would like to do. I'd like to make that motion. So it would be 3.5 to 4 years or whatever we got left.
Counselor Shank, what, exactly what, how long do you want to make it? We need to have some specifics if we're going to put a motion on the floor.
All right, I'll make it for 5 years then. Well, we'll go. I'll move that.
Thank you, Counselor Shank. Is there a seconder? Counselor Nori. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? The only question I have is how long did the county sign on for?
I could get back to you with a definitive answer on that, Mr. Mayor, but I believe it's a very standard practice to do a 5-year term with multiple renewals, but I would. I
It
could
would be
find
helpful
out.
if we knew tonight how long the county's, I would just hate to stagger it. And I would hate to say that we sign on for 5 years if the county has signed on for 3. So. Because the whole concept here is to be consistent. And if we're not going to be consistent, then maybe we shouldn't do it.
There is another option that we can sign on with the county and be as a joint agreement and partnership with the county of Lennox and Yankton as well. There was an option within their proposal that lower tier municipalities could also opt in to partner with them. That was another, I don't know what was all portrayed to council last April, but that was another option that staff were proposing. We were up for renewal in April of this year. The county went out in December of last year. They reached out if we wanted to renew in partnership with them, then this would eliminate the hurdles we'd have to jump through for having 2 different engineering firms.
I think we're getting really deep into the weeds with, I think let's leave that for now. We do have a motion on the floor. I'd like to know before we call the vote if there's an option or what the county had signed on for, whether they've got a 5-year agreement or 3-year agreement or a 2-year agreement. Go ahead, Counselor Shank. We can do whatever we want. It's our meeting. So if you're content and with Madam Clerk's permission, we can call for a 10-minute recess because we're getting close to that time for a recess anyway. So thank you. Madam Clerk, we good? We'll call a 15-minute recess. We'll come back here for 8:30. Welcome back, everybody. We're still working on the extension of the engineering services. We took a break to see if we can find some information with respect to the county's contract with Jewel Engineering, and I think we've got some information, do we not, Mr. Couple?
I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I found the county contract that was awarded with enactment date of January 1st of this year. It was for a 3-year term with the award or the ability for the county to extend for an additional 3 years. So their term would go from January of 2023 to December 31st of 2025 with a ability to extend for 3 years, which would take them to December 31st of 2028. It's their term. So I think with the synergies that we have found in our partnerships with the County of Lennox and Acton and all lower tiers, I would like to amend the staff recommendation to align with the terms of the county's contract. So we could at that time explore any efficiencies that we may get with utilizing the same firm.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. So if I'm hearing this right, we'll need a friendly amendment to the motion with respect to agreeing to a contract with Jewel Engineering from January 1st, 2024 through to December 31st, 2025, because they're already a year ahead of us, with an option to go beyond that. 3 years, which is the county's agreement. Are we all on the same page, maybe? Okay, and the mover and the secondary, I believe it was Councillor Shank and Councillor Norrie. Are you willing to do a friendly amendment? Councillor Shank first.
Yes, because that's because, so December 31st, 2025, and then with a 3-year extension, possible extension to 2028, right?
Yeah, there's an option at the end of 2025, from
same
what I
as the
understand.
county.
Same as the county.
Yes.
Councillor Norrie.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Norrie. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? And Madam Clerk, do you have what you need with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Probably best if you want to repeat it to us so we're sure that we're all on the same page.
Yes, so through your worship, I have the council received for information the Infrastructure Services Extension Engineering Services Report, and further that council agree to an extension of engineering services with Jewel Engineering to align with the dates of the County of Lennox and Addington Agreement with a term from January 1, 2023 to December 31, 2025, with an option for one additional extension term.
Now with that motion, we're backdating it to 2023. Are we good to do that?
Through your worship, I suppose I could say with the term ending December 31, 2025, if that is clearer for everyone.
Okay, are we good with the motion that's on the floor? Mover and seconder.
Recorded vote.
Thanks, Councillor Shank, and Councillor Shank is looking for a recorded vote.
Yes.
Sir, Ward 1, Councillor Shank.
Yes.
Ward 2, Councillor Hicks.
Yes.
Ward 3, Councillor Pennell.
No.
4, Councillor Norrie. Ward 5, Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes.
That motion's carried.
Thanks, folks. Moving on to Huff Lane parking report, and I think, Jeff, that's yours as well.
Worship, I'm just going to pull the report up so I can have it in front of me. Computer's not working, but the report I did write it, so I have it memorized. I can speak to I believe earlier in 2023, council had brought up the need for parking on Huff's Lane, and I believe a motion was passed to allow parking on the east side of Huff's Lane. When staff encountered some problems with this motion, when we went down to perform snow removal on Huff's Lane, the parking on the east side, we must, as plowing snow, deposit the snow to the east side of Huff Lanes, which would block in the vehicles parked there. A couple years back, there was some work done on Huff's Lane that widened the bulb out at the bottom on the west side of Huff Lane, just south of 62D. And that lends itself well to allow parking for approximately 10 to 12 cars. There could be some more minor corrections done down there that we could ensure parking of the 12 for sure to maybe even 14. But it lends itself better for our operations of snow removal. There was some other concerns by residents in the area and by the people utilizing the boat launch that there was no amenities down there. There would be a cost of approximately $180 a month, and staff in consulting with Mr. Brown from Parks and Rec that he agreed that there is a heavy use in the winter months for ice fishing, and that it would be an additional cost to their already established operating budget, but for an additional $360, a porta potty could be deployed down there for those months. So that is the recommendation, and there is a map highlighting the area for council to review.
Thanks, thanks, Jeff. Is there any questions for Jeff, Counselor Shank, and then I'll go to Counselor Hicks.
So Jeff, 10 to 12 vehicles, is that sufficient?
I believe through your worship, that's what we can deal with now. There isn't a neighbor there that does allow parking for fee. There is, once the ice is established and safe, it's very shallow for almost a good 100 feet out on shore that people do utilize parking there. It's what we have right now. I believe that's the best we have to offer.
Like, okay, I see the chief, our fire.
So through your worship, I'm just going to back up and echo what Mr. Cuthell has said. In the wintertime, it's not really as big of a deal as parking down there. I know that for snow removal and vehicle moval, it is. They park out on the shoreline. The bigger issue was for the residents down there, which we are also going to follow up on when the snow comes and stays, as we're going to have 2 emergency vehicles go down there. That was their biggest concern, was that we couldn't get our big apparatus down there. I know one plow can absolutely go down and back, and Jeff's nodding absolutely, but we did commit to doing that probably mid-January, early February.
Go ahead, Counselor Shank.
I'll move staff recommendation then.
Counselor Shank, Counselor Hicks, did you want to comment before we, or do you want to put it on the floor first? Okay, thanks. I think we're going to get some comments first, Mike, before we entertain the motion. So
I just have one question, Your Worship. Jeff, the section between 62D, so their driveway, and the actual road that takes you into all the other properties, is it possible that there could be parking there as well? The reason I'm asking this is not so much in the winter, whereas if someone is trailering a snowmobile or a side-by-side, not that I would take one out or park my car on the ice, but whatever, boats and trailers in the summer. So when you say 10 to 12 vehicles, to me, that translates to 5 trucks and trailers, maybe, if that's comparable. I don't know if there's that many. We've only ever seen a guy with a kayak down there when we've gone in the summer, but it's just a question.
We could look at some other design options for that. It would take some dollars to be invested into widening the platform of the road. From what staff has heard in the past, is that the winter time is when Huff's Lane's stress is put on Huff's Lane. You'd be able to, on a diagonal park, I think with a little bit of improvement down there to where that existing bulb's widened, we could do a little bit more there, and you could accommodate It'd just be like at Cuthell Lane and that if you come in on an angle, you could accommodate them. And we don't have the snow to contend with at that time. So I believe you could get, I don't see any issues. I don't think there's enough boaters. You would know yourself there in the summertime. I think we can accommodate the summer for sure. I think the wintertime is the issue if we can accommodate them all. And this is much better than what's ever been seen in the past.
I'll
Go ahead,
second-
Counselor Hicks.
I'll second the motion.
Thanks. We do have a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussions? I guess the only comments that I have are, how are we going to manage the area that we're looking at for the extended parking and the parking that's available? Because knowing fair well what's going to happen is that people are just going to pull over to the side of the road and it's going to be a nightmare as far as trying to manage where it is right now, at least in my humble opinion, because we're going to get more than 10 to 12 vehicles down there and they're going to be parked all over the place. And then what they're going to do is they're going to park up the road anyway. So I like the idea of extending maybe possibly on the east side between the last resident and then all the other residences. But I guess my question is how are we going to manage this and how are we going to set this up so that people are going to park the way that is most efficient to the ramp itself?
Yeah, through your worship. If there was any widening, I would just, we would, I did not look in the area in question on the west side to add more parking. I'm sure we could. We would have to pipe that section of the ditch and we could widen the platform to the west. Would be the recommendation. Because of the steep incline there, our plows do have to plow down the hill when they're going down, and we would be depositing the snow to the east. And so we can ensure we get out. So we could look and come back to council if they wished next year with pricing and the ability to create more parking on the west. Between the entrance to the other residents off of Huff Lane and 62D, as Councilor Hicks had requested.
Okay, I'm gathering that this is probably going to be a work in progress. And we will probably have to revisit it after this winter's ice fishing season, as I'm guessing.
Yes, your worship, as we would have to, they would have to require piping to extend that platform out there to accommodate for more parking.
I kind of think we probably will have to look at something, but anyways, I know it attracts quite a few people down there in the wintertime. And if they can't find a place to park there, they just pull out in the ice. So in any event, we do have a resolution. If there's nothing else, we do have a resolution that's on the floor, and we'll look, or a motion that's on the floor, sorry. We'll call the vote if there's nothing else. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Seasonal load restrictions is the next one that's up, and that is yours as well, Jeff.
Yes, your worship. This has become a concern as of late for the town or for the municipality. The county of Lennox and Addington used to have the majority of their roads were load restricted with seasonal load restrictions. As they've been rebuilding a majority of their roads and testing them, they have been able to lift the load restrictions, which has then opened our roads up to vulnerability of heavy haul trucks accessing our roads. So we had partnered with the county and other lower tier municipalities and even reached out to others, Tyonega and Hastings, so and Frontenac, to try and come up with something that would be similar. As you cross boundaries, you would be able to expect the same type of limitations on municipal local roads. We believe that this bylaw is well written and gives authority to the road authority to either enact the load restrictions earlier and or extend them later. and even grant permissions to allow heavy hauls to happen throughout the period if weather still permits. This would give us the ability, if there was a large scale project happening and there needed to be 20, 30 contract or 20 concrete trucks going over that road. Well, do you want to see 20 or do you want to see 40? If we can work with the contractor and during a time of freeze up when the roads are still stiff and able to accommodate it, you could allow the 20 trucks. It's going to be better than having 40 trucks go over the road. So we have these kind of abilities written into this bylaw to help accommodate for the construction needs and to protect our roads. We have Ontario Good Roads had recently partnered with the Ministry of Transportation as well. And they came up with a tool that takes current weather data and per area and kind of predicts when you should be enacting your load periods. And this was ran last year, and it was kind of forecasted for our area south of Highway 7 to the lake that a better, more appropriate time for us to enact these load restrictions would be February 15th through to April 15th. The original load restriction period was March 1st till April 30th. So this would be also a change that would be enacted in this bylaw with that ability to extend those periods. Another change that would be for us, we were really fighting with the ability to manage and erect all these signs throughout the municipality. We've had great adherence by all the contractors locally and everything else. It hasn't been a real issue for us. So to put up, I don't know the exact number of signs, but it was north of 50 signs that would have to be put up and managed and bagged. To regulate this, we're proposing to only sign the roads that would be exempt as your haul route for our local roads, and do a mail out to all the contractors, and also will be posted on 511 and our website to advertise those haul routes. And we are proposing that we would have Goodyear Road and Jim Kimmett Boulevard as exempt haul routes. Goodyear Road was recently reconstructed, and there's a lot of industrial and commercial traffic that utilizes that road, as well as Jim Kimmett Boulevard being an EDR route, if in case of the 401 being shut down. So those are the two reasons why those roads were proposed to be exempt.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there any questions or comments for Jeff with respect to his report or presentation? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship, you did partially answer my question about how do you notify people about the change. When would you have to notify them? Like, when do you start posting that information?
If this was passed, we would start preparing a mail out. We would post it on our website, social media, and we'd also do just a direct mail out to any local contractors in that. It's been well received. The county has for a couple years now posted a map online. It's a great map. It just, they're highlighted in black, the routes that you're allowed to haul through. I've heard that talked about a great deal by contractors and haulers in the area. So we'd utilize that same map and just tag on to what theirs were and advertise it through our social media as well.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the only thing I have, Jeff, is, and it may be a silly question, but who actually enforces this?
The OPP.
The OPP actually
They
does
have
the enforcement of it?
Yep, Ministry of Transportation certified officers that the county had purchased them a couple sets of scales last year, and they have them right in their vehicle. They can pull someone over and check them.
Perfect, thanks. Is there anything else? Seeing none, look for a motion to put on the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
I'll move that motion.
Staff recommendation, I'm thinking. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Martin. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Staff report, emergency response plan. And I'm not sure, I guess Aaron's coming up.
Through you, your worship, I have nothing further to add to the report, but I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thanks, Aaron. Is there any questions of Aaron with respect to her report? Seeing none, we do have a staff recommendation the council receive for information, the fire department emergency response plan report, and further that council adopt the emergency response plan through the passage of bylaw 2023-0086 as presented within the council agenda. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Enterprise lease agreement. Mr. Murphy, you've got the floor.
Through your worship, I think we've discussed this enough at the last budget meeting, so nothing further to add, but happy to take any questions if needed. This is just more of a formality based on the discussion previously. So just getting this on the books in resolution and such.
Great, thanks. Nathan, is there any questions or comments for Nathan with respect to his report? Seeing none, we have a recommendation. Council receive for information the financial services enterprise lease agreement report, and further that council authorize staff to continue leasing the 6 vehicles that are under lease agreements, which includes the maintenance agreement, and further that council authorize staff to terminate the leasing program for any further vehicles and terminate the maintenance agreement for any town-owned vehicles. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Arena capital fee and ice resurfacer replacement fee. And that's you again, Nathan?
Through your worship, this is some more cleanup stuff. So in preparation for tonight's fees and services bylaw update, our clerk found some outstanding bylaws. So it's purely cleanup from the previous reserves policy we brought in, I think in September or October, and then it'll tie into the update to the fees and services bylaw. So unfortunately, a very wordy recommendation for the mayor to read, but I think it's a relatively straightforward process here.
Thanks, Nathan, and I'm getting good at it. So is there any questions or comments for Nathan with respect to this report? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the financial services arena replacement fee and ice resurfacer fee report, and further that notwithstanding the provisions of section 3 of the bylaw number 02-37, being a bylaw to establish an arena user surcharge reserve fund, the $10 hour ice rental surcharge shall be maintained past the date when all the debentures to finance the construction of the arena sports complex have been paid in full. And further that council deem any contradictions between bylaw number 02-37 and bylaw number 2023-0067, being a bylaw to a reserves and reserve fund policy for the corporation of the town of Greater Napanee, and further being further to have been superseded by bylaw number 2023-0067, and further that all funds raised from the arena user surcharge rate shall continue to be placed into the arena capital reserve fund to be used for the purposes of capital repairs or future replacement of the existing arena sports complex, and further that the amount of the arena user surcharge may be amended by council from time to time through the fees and charges by law in order to maintain adequate funding levels of the arena capital reserve fund. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Proposed service fees update. And I believe Annie's on her way up. The floor is yours, Annie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to add that the Recreation Advisory Committee has reviewed some of these rental rates and that new ICE rates will be coming back to council in the spring for implementation during the off season. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Is there any questions or comments for Annie with respect to her report? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Annie, I'm just, when I was reviewing your report, I got to the mobile food service rentals. And I see that, that they've gone up, but they haven't gone up very much between the non-hydro and the hydro. It seems like we might be a little bit shy on the hydro. Do we know if we're breaking even on the hydro or not?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Pennell, the last I discussed with Chris Brown, we were able to cover with the difference between the mobile lease stall without hydro and with. I can double check that that is still the case, that there haven't been any rate changes or anything.
Sorry, can you say that again? You're going to double check with them to find out what, sorry?
Sorry, so the last I talked to him, we were able to cover any of the hydro fees, but I can double check to make sure nothing's changed since I last spoke to him about it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there anything further for Annie? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the Community Corporate Services Proposed Service Fees Update Report, and further that council direct staff to bring forward an update to the fees for services bylaw in accordance with the recommendations outlined in this report, subject to the town's public notice requirements. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Draft donations and sponsorship policy, and that's yours as well, Annie.
Happy to take any questions.
Is there any questions or comments for Annie with respect to her report with respect to the draft donations and sponsorship policy? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Just one quick question. Thank you, Your Worship. So where do memorial or in memoriam? Get the right word here. So if someone wanted to put up a new lamppost, or does that fall under this as well, or is that something different?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Hicks, we have a separate memorial policy that will be coming in the new year, most likely one of the first January meetings, as it's just about ready to go.
Sorry, and if I just may add on to that, through Your Worship, this policy does propose to empower the manager of community economic development to implement and oversee sponsorship and advertising programs. So obviously new programs would still likely come to council for your ratification and support, but that is a responsibility that's being assigned to this department in general. If there are new opportunities for sponsorships that come up, that they would be able to do that.
Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
So would council be made aware just in general of what's been proposed? My concern is if something were turned down or if something were accepted in between meetings, like would we be made aware of it? It's if we're questioned about it on the street, like I heard that so-and-so donated whatever property or something, would we learn of this from you, or is this something that we're going to learn about from the general public?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Hicks, if it were a donation of property or something, yes, council would be made aware of that. If it were to be a bench, light post, something like that, under the current draft policy that we're working on for memorial assets, it would not be brought to council.
Thanks, Annie, and thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything further? I know that staff are looking for some direction with respect to this report. Is there any further questions? I think, if I'm not mistaken, staff's looking for a decision with respect to either adopting the policy as presented possibly bringing back a draft policy back for further discussions on the January 9th or January 30th meeting to incorporate specific feedback given during the council meeting or incorporate feedback provided by council via email update or to completely abandon the draft policy. So council, what are your thoughts with respect to the motion? Councillor Nori.
The policy looks fine. They've done all the work. No point reinventing the wheel again.
And I'm thinking that you're looking to note and receive and to adopt the policy as presented. That's your motion.
As stated.
Thank you, Councillor Nori. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Pennell. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Recreation Center Naming Rights Draft Agreement, and that's you as well, Annie. So you've got the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, happy to take any questions.
Is there any comments or questions for Annie with respect to this report? Seeing none, and I think Annie, you're looking for some direction as well as to how we want to go forward with this, is to issue the RFP as presented, possibly bring the RFP back for further discussion at the 9th or January 30th meeting, and incorporate specific feedback given during the meeting or incorporate feedback provided by council via email update until that date. What's council's wishes with respect to this report? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Or are we increasing the naming rights value?
Annie, can you answer that?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Shank, yes, the minimum bid would be increased by $10,000 from what the original was set in 2003.
So there will be a starting bid, but obviously when it goes out to RFP, it could go anywhere.
Absolutely. So through Your Worship to Councillor Shank, the minimum bid per year would be 30,000, which would be 300,000 over the 10 years as the minimum amount we would accept.
Sorry, does that answer your question, Mike?
Just when I was reading this and I was saying just asking that.
Perfect. What's council's thoughts with respect to, because I think Annie's looking for some direction, so are we good with the, go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to say staff recommendation and we adopt the policy or the.
Note and receive the report, staff report, and to issue the RFP as presented.
That's correct. Yes, thank you.
A motion on the floor for Councillor Pennell. Is it seconded by Councillor Shank? If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bay of Quinte Marketing, Regional Marketing Board, Regional Partnership. And are you speaking to that as well, Annie? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to add this report is for information after the presentation from Doug Stevenson from the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board. Happy to take any questions.
Is there any questions or comments for Annie with respect to her report that's before us this evening? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So, but this document, I don't want to belabor it tonight, but we're going to be going through budget process anyway. So this will all be discussed on January 18th because how they come up with some of these numbers that kind of blows my mind. But this will be discussed January 18th, I believe, when we have this about a budget meeting anyway. So we can ask those.
I think there's probably going to be a couple opportunities. We're going to talk about whether we actually want to spend it, whether it's in the budget to do it. And then I think there'll be another conversation after that, as that if we do put an amount of money in the budget, do we want to obtain this organization? So there will be lots of other opportunities to speak to it. But we do have an opportunity tonight, if you got any questions with respect to the report, that we can ask those tonight. And then that might give Annie an opportunity to see if she can find some answers for the questions that we have tonight. Councillor Hicks.
Thanks, through your worship. So I'm reading here under financial implications that the 2024 budget has been drafted to include the per capita request, which is 24,632. Correct? Yes. Okay. And you've also noted that if we decide, I'll rephrase that, if you decide, I've already decided, but if the decision is made to not proceed with an agreement with this partnership with Bay of Quinte, you've lost basically $40,000 in your first year of collecting the accommodation tax. You have to have a nonprofit marketing board as your partner in order to implement the MAT. The benefits far outweigh the cost of $24,000. And there's also, we have already determined that we are not hiring any more staff. And I can pretty much guarantee that the staff that we do have is not going to be able to pick up what the Bay of Quinte is currently doing for Greater Napanee. So I'll just leave it at that for consideration.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So Annie, the question I would like to have you ask Bay Quinte is that for $24,632 worth of advertising that we spend towards them this or next year and what we did, they're saying here was result in the estimated of over 18.6 million. Of course, they put estimated, all right, in a yearly visitor spending in Greater Napanee. I'd just like to know how they're coming up with these numbers. Have them explain these numbers. And then they say 720,396 in economic activity generated by the Bay of Quinte marketing campaigns. So they gave you the numbers, but I have no way, how did they justify where they're coming up with those numbers? So that was what I asked previously, but they didn't say it again. So that raises an alarm flag for me. So if you could ask them that and see if we can do that and get that before the January 18th, that'd be great.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. And I see Annie writing down on her piece of paper there. So is there anything else? And I just to maybe I can to Councillor Hicks's point is that I think we've got two separate contracts, do we not? We have one or two separate conversations. I won't say contracts, two separate conversations is in the fact that they're looking to promote our area is one, but to obtain them, if we use them as a nonprofit for the MAT tax, that's a completely separate conversation. So even though they seem to run together, they really actually don't. Am I correct in that assessment?
Through your worship, I would say yes, they are two separate conversations with where we are at currently with the accommodation tax. So right now, yes, we would just be looking at a memorandum of understanding as step one. And then as the clerk has within the forward-facing calendar, once we get into the conversations about the MAT tax, then they potentially would be one of the players in that conversation.
And one is not necessarily dependent on the other. Am I correct with that assessment?
Yes.
Councillor Hicks.
So I'm going to ask the question here, or I'm going to make a statement. In signing the memorandum of understanding with the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board, we form a partnership with them. If you don't form a partnership with them, should you decide to implement the municipal accommodation tax to start with hotels, low hanging fruit, and then we'll get into the short-term accommodation at another session, you would still have to enter into a partnership with a non-profit. So this begs the question. We've had 2 years with Bay of Quinte. I think it's a good working relationship between town staff. I know that I've learned a lot as the council representative on the board. If we, for $26,000, you can't hire someone to do what they're doing. They have a fully dedicated staff and this is what they do. This is their expertise. So, and I didn't mean, I just want to clarify, I didn't mean to disparage town staff. It's just that if you take away what 5 people are doing, you cannot expect one person to pick all of that up for the entire town of Greater Napanee. So, which goes from 33 Highway to north of Roblin. So I can't stress enough that I really think we do get bang for our buck. That's just where I'm at. And implementing a MAT is probably a long enough process that if you had to start over with a new partner, that would not be conducive to a quick implementation.
Yeah, and I didn't want to cloud the issue, but and I'll use the example that if we hadn't formed any kind of a relationship with Bay of Quinte Marketing Group, and we decided to go forward with the MAT tax, we could solicit them to be our nonprofit partner in that without having a prior contract with them. I just didn't want to say that one's dependent on the other, because I think they are two separate conversations, but I didn't want to minimize what you're saying with respect to the product that they produce with respect to promoting our community.
If I may, just one more thing. So the 24,000 that we're talking about here, that's a baseline. So that's gas in the tank that gets everything going, and it's seed money. You could do the MAT tax and just say, well, you're only going to get your half of the MAT and that's it. Personally, I think the seed money is important because it shows intention to work with them. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Latterberg.
Thank you, through your worship. I just want to draw attention to council that prior to signing this MOU with Bay of Quinte Marketing Board, our marketing budget for the town was $3,000, and there was no leverage on that $3,000. What this $24,000 does for you is leverage their entire budget and their staff, which was leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 5-6 years ago.
Great, thanks, Brent. Is there anything further? Seeing none, we have a staff recommendation to note received report with respect to the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board Regional Partnership. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaws, and we do have a number of bylaws, so we'll work our way through this. The first one is bylaw number 2023-0080, a bylaw to constitute and appoint a committee of adjustment for the period of January 1st, 2024 through to December 31st, 2024. We'll put a motion on the floor and do the
First,
three.
second, and third.
Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further conversations, we'll read it a first, second, and final reading. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023-0081, a bylaw to appoint a treasurer. Look for a motion to put it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further questions or comments with respect to this by, we'll read it a first, second, and finally pass this 19th day of December 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023-0082, a bylaw to adopt the 2024 utilities budget and amend the water and sewer service charges. Motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Norrie. If there's no questions or comments with respect to this motion, we'll read it a first, second, and finally pass this 19th day of December 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023, a bylaw to appoint a municipal law enforcement officer, night patrol. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no comments or questions, ready first, second, and finally pass this 19th day of December 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Motion bylaw number 2023-0084, official plan amendment number 50, PLOPMA 2023-057. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Is there's no questions or comments, ready first, second, and finally passed this 19th day of December, 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023-0085 to amend zoning bylaw 0222 PLZA CO 2023-058. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Martin. There's no further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to it. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 19th day of December, 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023-0086, a bylaw to adopt an emergency management program and emergency response plan for the town of Greater Napanee. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Hicks. No questions or comments. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 19th day of December, 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023-0087, a bylaw to designate effective dates of a reduced load period on roads. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Martin. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 19th day of December, 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Information reports from members. Do any members of council have any information reports that they'd like to speak to tonight? Seeing none. Inquiries. Do any members of council have any inquiries of staff that they can go back to the drawing board and see if they can get you some answers? Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is directed to Mr. Cuthell at the back of the room. The gentleman that's been designated as the patrol officer for winter parking, can he do a periodic check at Huff's Lane? Is that within his scope? And he can feel free to issue tickets? Yes?
I think, Madam. I think Madam Clerk wants to comment as well.
Through your worship, the bylaw specifically states that they are empowered to enforce the winter parking ban only. So unless they're out there patrolling at 2 a.m, they probably could not do that. Once there is ice, we can look at expanding bylaw patrols into that area.
Councillor Hicks, Councillor Shank.
I think it would go a long ways to reassuring the homeowners down there if there were a periodic check during the ice fishing season in particular. Thank you.
Councillor Shank.
This inquiry is a lot of tow trucks that we have in our community, and it's quite competitive, and we have a lot of new tow trucks that are coming in and taking a portion. Now their rates were set last week. They had a meeting, from what I understand. I'd just like to have, I know staff's busy, but I'd like to, if somebody could look into what other municipalities do for licensing or reviewing, or, you know what I mean, of tow truck operation, and is there a certain license fee or a certain percentage comes back to the municipality? Because we have a lot of tow truck operators that are coming from Toronto or outside of our area. And of course they go on a list, and so therefore they're taking revenue away from the local ones also. It's just something that we should look, maybe, I know it's down the road, but something to look into, because from what I understand, it was quite an excitable meeting that they did have. And Fire Chief.
Yep, go ahead, Chief Hammond.
So through your worship, Councillor Shank, there is a list created by the OPP. To get on that list, they have to provide staffing, equipment, response times. That's already in effect. And I am unaware of any municipality that regulates towing. But again, we can look into that for you. But the OPP right now have that list, and they have notified us that there are companies moving from Toronto closer this way, and it is causing some concern. However, they're the regulating body at this point.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm well aware of that, but as you well know, that meeting was held in your area, or you're in your building. So the point is that some of the people that were coming from Toronto or coming from outside of the area that are taking some of the businesses away, they're starting to create rifts, and there was quite an excitable. So I'm just saying, if you could look into it to see, I know in Toronto, they have certain zones that they look after. Not that we're anywhere close to Toronto, but I'm just saying, maybe be proactive, see if there's anything out there that we can do. And if we can't do anything, well, then so be it. But just to look into see what we can do. And you know, the individual that looks after that anyway. So do I. So maybe ask him.
I just, and I'm going to go from memory here. There is a contracted list that the OPP uses. But I think what you're talking about is I think in the big metropolitan areas, they actually created bylaws with respect to how tow truck drivers operate within their municipalities. So the way it works in here, the way it works here is that if the person that goes in the ditch or has a car accident doesn't have a choice or doesn't care who tows their vehicle, the OPP will call, well, they'll say next on list, and they'll just send somebody. Now, if the person that puts the car in the ditch has a choice or wants to make their own decision, then they can pick whoever they want, whether it's the first guy that comes along or a friend or another tow truck from another municipality. But I think the municipalities that in the GTA have actually bylaws which try to regulate the tow truck drivers, which I think you're talking about. But again, that's just from memory. So go ahead, Chief Hammond.
Through your worship, you're absolutely right. So a preferred towing company, if I have CAA and the police ask me at the accident, do you have a towing company? Absolutely, they're going to allow me to use CAA. However, if I say no, I don't care, then they go down a list and they actually have the contracts with these towing companies. And you are correct. Where I was in the city of Burlington, the city of Burlington had a contract that basically said they would follow the list of the OPP because it was easier for them to source out all the towing equipment and staffing and security levels and all that stuff.
I'm sure that we probably could confirm some of that with respect to what's being done in other municipalities. I mean, I don't think it's a high priority thing, but as and Madam Clerk will laugh at me when we have time that we could probably.
I was aware of the list. My only concern is that you have some local established, tow truck operators that are in the area. And then when with the being so contentious that meeting was, and then you have other people that are coming into the area. Well, do our people go into Toronto or do, you know what I mean? So that's the reason why I was wondering if there's any way we could solve some of those problems.
It's not a new problem. And having worked in the GTA, probably, well, it's close to 35 or 36 years ago. The towing business is a very aggressive type of business. And that's why I think some of the larger municipalities up there actually went by way of bylaw to try and control it. It's a very aggressive business. Let's just leave it at that, I guess, is the safest way to put it. So is there anything else? Seeing nothing, is there any notices of motion this evening? Seeing none, new business. Does anybody have any new business this evening? Seeing none, announcements. Do any members of council have any announcements they'd like to make? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
It was one heck of a year, guys. We've learned a lot, and everybody have a Merry Christmas. I know it's very difficult at times, but I think the municipality is moving in the right direction. We're getting a lot of things solved, a lot more things to solve also, but everybody play with their grandkids or kids, and everybody have a Merry Christmas. And then we'll go at it again in January.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. And I will reiterate that probably at the end of the meeting, but you're absolutely right. Is there anything else? Seeing none, the forward calendar, we've all had an opportunity to look at it. Is there anything that anybody wants to speak about with respect to the forward calendar or the council resolution tracker? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion for the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the corporation of the town of Greater Napanee. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no comments, questions, or concerns, read a first, second, and finally pass this 19th day of December 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed, motion's carried. And just before we adjourn, I would like to reiterate the comments made by Councillor Shank and wish everybody on behalf of the town of Napanee, town of Greater Napanee, and the town of Greater Napanee Council a very, very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and a very prosperous 2024. Councillor Shank is absolutely right in the fact that we've had a very busy 2023. And I think we've got some exciting things that are going to happen in 2024. So thank you for your patience, and we will see you in the new year. Good evening, everybody. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Shank, second by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Good night, folks.